I think probably the biggest thing that people misunderstand is, I guess, maybe some of those stereotypes around eating disorders and disordered eating. I think a lot of the time when I talk about, okay, I work with eating disorders, a lot of people imagine in their head that it's, you know, probably someone experiencing anorexia, someone in a tiny body, extremely malnourished, um, and often that, sometimes people believe it's a bit of a choice when in reality, if you speak to anyone with an eating disorder, they'd say it's definitely not a choice. They wouldn't choose this on their worst enemy. And it's very, very debilitating. It affects all areas of people's lives.
Hello, my friend, and welcome to Something for Everybody. My name is Aaron Mashpitz. Kiah, welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to chatting with you today.
Absolutely. First and most important question is, how are you doing, like actually for real? How are you doing?
Oh, interesting that you say most important question for real. I'm extremely tired at the moment, for real. I've got a little baby who's 11 months old and she is currently not sleeping very much at all. So I am waking up hourly. So very, very tired because of that, but still, managing to get through. I kind of talk about I'm in the phase of my life where I am surviving and not thriving. So I'm hoping that the sleep gets a little bit better because, as many of us know, sleep is so important for health and concentration and being a healthy person in general. But obviously, in some cases, we just can't have it as much as we'd like.
Yeah. Was there anything that you did to try and prepare yourself for this, or how's motherhood been so far?
It's been pretty good so far, generally. I'm pretty lucky. I've got two little girls who are 2 and, 11 months. I feel like you can't really prepare for parenthood that much as you can read all the books, but nothing kind of prepares you for, I guess, the reality of what it's like. Um, and it is quite energy draining, but it is also incredibly rewarding as well. So I am really thankful for the whole experience, and also it definitely gives you a bit of a different perspective with life. I'm a lot better with my own boundaries these days, which is something that I wasn't very good at previously. I pretty much always just work because I could, whereas now I think I get a bit better I have better boundaries in my life, probably forced boundaries more than anything, so that I can kind of spend time with the kids and my partner. But it also gives you an opportunity to reflect on what's important for you in life, and what are you working for? What are you doing things for? And so I really like that. I've been able to have this experience, although challenging, extremely rewarding.
Yeah. I mean, the best experiences are the ones that are most challenging, not the ones that are like super traumatic, that are like debilitating, that sort of take you out a little bit, which most of us have experienced those. But these little, I don't want to use the word minor, that makes it insignificant, but these roadblocks, these challenges that hopefully we can, as you're saying, gain a new perspective from, learn from, and eventually, become maybe better for it, or more wiser, or more kind, or whatever the ending result potentially could be for that experience. So it's very cool.
Definitely. It's definitely given me the opportunity to have a lot more self-compassion towards myself. So I'm a lot better at now, identifying that I might not be able to do all the things that I want to do, and that's okay. It's life is in seasons. This is a sleep-deprived season at the moment, but the future maybe will definitely be different. So it's just about being able to be okay with what the present, what you can do with the present, and trying to reduce the guilt, because it's not super helpful to feel guilty about stuff.
Yeah, that's a hard emotion though to process sometimes, because well, Anyways, I'll make a hard left here because I do great at podcast transitions. um, but what's some things that you think people misunderstand when thinking about eating disorders or disordered eating?
Mm, that's a really good question. I think probably the biggest thing that people misunderstand is, I guess, maybe some of those stereotypes around eating disorders and disordered eating. I think a lot of the time when I talk about, okay, I work with eating disorders, a lot of people imagine in their head that it's, probably someone experiencing anorexia, someone in a tiny body, extremely malnourished, and often that, sometimes people believe it's a bit of a choice when in reality, if you speak to anyone with an eating disorder, they'd say it's definitely not a choice. They wouldn't choose this on their worst enemy. And it's very, very debilitating. It affects all areas of people's lives. But it also doesn't discriminate. Eating disorders can affect any body size, any gender, any race, ethnicity. They can affect all sorts of people. So, I think that is extremely, interesting to remember in this kind of world that we live in, where we are constantly told messages over and over about what we should look like, or we might find, comments about people's diets and weight are, just thrown out casually all the time by, just people, friends, family members, the media, everything. And, we don't know, how those comments that people say might affect someone. Something that might just be like an offhanded comment, often sometimes stays with that person for the rest of their life. And so we've got to remember that we don't know anything about people's relationship with food and their body just by looking at them. They might be, experiencing an eating disorder for all we know, because anyone, any shape or size can have one.
Yeah, that yeah, I think a lot of people just assume that if you look good or you're in the gym regularly or you're sort of in this like fitness culture, which I've been in since, I was 13 when I started working out for sport and then some other stuff. Like I still see myself when I look in the mirror as this small, scrawny little boy who couldn't get anything done. Now I'm a 6'2", 230-pound grown man, and I have been lifting weights for a long time, but I still see myself that way and treat myself that way sometimes. And I don't think that people notice that when they look at men specifically when it comes to body image or body dysmorphia. And I'm seeing a lot more of that, nowadays in sort of the spaces I'm in. I mentioned before we started recording, I figured we'd get here, but that I used to be a professional wrestler. And so that's a sport where, like WWE style wrestling, so you think The Rock, Stone Cold Steve Austin, think like that, where we're running around and wrestling and entertaining people in very small amounts of clothing. And our job is to look like a superhero, larger than life. And so everything must be perfect in the right place. And we're also on the road all the time. So nutrition is like important, but it's hard to find. And so we're thinking about our body constantly. And then we're putting ourselves out in the public space to get judged by people, on purpose. Like I did that. It wasn't like I knew that going in, but I still wanted to do this thing. And so the issues that come with that are plenty. And so I think people don't recognize how pervasive and deadly some of these things can be by just scanning someone and being like, oh, that person works out. They must eat right. They must have a, whatever. And it's like, no, you don't know. And that goes with anything, right? It's always like this nuanced approach about anything we talk about, especially when it's as complicated and as pervasive as an eating disorder. But still, I've seen that a lot, especially with the guys that I talk to who are still in professional wrestling, thinking like, my body sucks. I can't do this. I don't know why I'm eating this. I shouldn't do this. I can't believe I look like this. I shouldn't have had that, piece of candy when I was driving home from the show or whatever. And it's like, all that is so complicated to figure out because it had to have started somewhere and maybe got exacerbated along the way through all of those things you mentioned of media, culture, the sport, family, friends potentially. So I that comes up for me when thinking about something that people might misunderstand about any sort of body image, eating disorder, or disordered eating type of thing.
Exactly. And I think you kind of hit the nail on the head there with like, when often I think as a society we look at people on an elite level, like say professional wrestling, and I think about WWE, right? Like I watch WWE occasionally because my partner loves it, and they have that quote unquote idealistic body for men. There's that lot of pressure of that big, muscular, chiseled abs type look, right? And that, as a society, I think we look at that and we're like, wow, that's what healthy is. That's what being fit should look like. But people don't see the other side where a lot of those people in those elite performance sports, people who are, body related sports, I can see this for ballet as well, they have so much pressure to maintain that look that they, may often be experiencing disordered eating disorders, body dysmorphia disorder. And so they're not technically probably healthy, but as a world, that's what our standards are kind of set on. So it just kind of highlights that, as a society, our idealized bodies are so unrealistic. But that's what we're told that we should often aim toward, be aiming to get to.
Yeah, and I mean, I found a lot with like working with people at the highest level, even myself included. This is very true. Is that I'm running away from something, not towards something. Like I'm running away from being that boy that I used to be, which pushes me a lot, gives me a lot of motivation to get into the gym and do all of these things. But I mean, at some point, we can make a pivot to be more of a healthy place. Like I get to the place where I just enjoy being in the gym. Like it's a space where I can think and I get to see people that I enjoy. Like it's so funny going to the gym every day. You see the same people every day. You've never talked to them, but you're like, I like seeing you here. Like I know you're here, you're alive. Like that's great. And you see them and you create this like relationship. And anyways, that's off topic. But but we find that most people are running away from something when they're trying to reach this sort of level and not haven't integrated in this sort of harmony of integrating that and allowing it to still maybe be a motivator, but more of in a healthy space, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, definitely. And I think especially gender plays a big role in that as well. Like you talk about experience, like being around a lot of male wrestlers. I think men in particular and gender diverse people as well, but there is even more stigma around talking about body image and eating issues. And I just even think about like the fact that majority of my clients identify as female, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the majority of like that only females experience eating issues. Plenty of men experience them as well. They just don't talk about it as much because there's a lot more stigma around it.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, speaking of girls, how do you think Instagram has impacted that already? Because I know for young girls, like they're all going to experience body image issues. Like it's just like, I don't want to say a normal part of growing up, but it's part of the maturity, puberty process. Things change. People grow at different times. Like they feel different ways. Their body is icky one day and nice the next day, and they feel this way or that way. And that's always been like a normal thing, I believe. And now they have all of this thing in front of them where it's like manufactured perfect people who don't look like this in real life, but we don't get to see that real life. Like, what do you think are some of these effects, or what have you seen, or how's it played a role in your life?
Yeah, look, I think it's probably one of the biggest effects as well. And, I feel fortunate that I did have social media when I was a teenager. Instagram kind of came about when I was in like the end of high school, but it wasn't nearly as intense as it is now. And I am I feel like I had an eating disorder already, like, and I didn't even have social media. I feel like that would have been so much worse for me. And it is like, I just think it, like, the rates of eating disorders have massively skyrocketed, and I definitely think social media is a massive part of that, massive thing I talk to about with all of my clients, because when we when we look on social media, whether it's TikTok or Instagram, it's this constant comparison that, we're essentially comparing ourselves against. It doesn't matter if it's looking at other people and being like, oh, wow, they've got a better job than me. They've got a better life. They've got a relationship. They've got, that they look like they're having so much fun. They've got so much friends. There are so many things that we can compare ourselves against. And body image is a massive one as well, because like a lot of the time when people are kind of posting things online, I would say, especially, maybe kind of people who might be posting things in like bikinis or even fitness gear, it's often the people that, and this is not to blame them, but like a lot of the people that do post those photos tend to fit that ideal stereotype of being thinner, being, maybe more muscular as well. And so if we're kind of taking, so say like a 15-year-old child, 15-year-old girl for the, sake of this, and, all she's seeing in her social media feed is just all these, attractive people, chiseled abs, muscular, going to the gym, thin bodies. And maybe she doesn't have that thin body. Maybe she doesn't fit that, ideal stereotype. Then that kind of starts to make her feel like, oh, there's something wrong with me. My body isn't, what the ideal is. I can start to really feed that comparison and go, okay, well, that's the ideal. That's what I should be, working towards, because that's what everyone looks like. Because when we kind of see these social media feeds and that's what we see, like just see the same sort of types of bodies, it makes us feel like that's what everyone looks like and I don't. And, as humans, we really like to fit in. Like that's often like one of our kind of biological traits, or one of the things that we want to do. But when we, feel like our bodies don't fit in with society, it can make us feel really excluded. It can make us feel, essentially drawn to pursue things like weight loss, drawn to pursue like disordered eating behaviors. And so like, when I kind of talk to my clients about this, one of the things that I talk to them about is, going for a walk down the street and just like noticing all the different body types that you pass. Often we pass so many different body types, tall, short, bigger, smaller, different ethnicities, because in reality, in the world, there are so many different body types. But when we are on social media, we often get this echo chamber of the same body type, and it's especially kind of prevalent, like it just gets amplified by like algorithms like TikTok, which constantly tests and sees what you like. And if you're spending like a bit too long on one, like say weight loss video, then you're going to get tons of weight loss videos, and it just kind of keeps on pushing that same sort of content. But that's not what reality is like. That's not what the world's like, but that's what we feel the world is like.
So how would you begin to help someone who might be feeling that way? I mean, I know this question is very challenging because everyone is very specific and they have their own environment and circumstances that they grow up in, and you work with people trying to get to know them and their, idiosyncrasies and all this stuff. But on a general level, like how would you try and help someone there?
Yeah, so there's a few different strategies that I think about. So I think the first thing that I think about is even kind of, I guess, before even going on social media, thinking about your intention of going on social media. Because often it's like a little bit automatic. We just pick up our phone, go on Instagram, go on TikTok. We don't even think about why we're doing it. It's just a habit. So when we're kind of doing that, we almost, because we have no kind of point of going on, we pretty much absorb all the information that's in there. And then that can feed comparison. So the first thing is really just catching yourself and going, okay, hold on a sec. Why am I going on here? Do I actually need to go on there, or can I go do something else? Can I go play Duolingo and learn a language? Do I have to go on social media? The second thing that I think about is noticing how you feel when you are on social media. Like if you are going on certain Instagram accounts or following certain TikToks, but those accounts make you feel really essentially poor about yourself, you feel really guilty, a lot of comparison comes up, it's probably a good sign not to follow them. Like we know that like guilt and shame is not a good motivator of health habits. So we want to try and get that out of our life if we can. And if unfollowing someone can really help us do that, that is a powerful, powerful way to begin. So trying to take that stuff out of your feed, firstly, by unfollowing. Instagram and TikTok does, well, Instagram, I can't remember if TikTok does as well, but Instagram does have features where you can turn off weight loss related content as well. And you can go, okay, don't show posts like this. And so that can be really good to try train your algorithm as well, to not show certain accounts like weight loss or dieting. And then being intentional about what you do look at. So trying to retrain your algorithm, maybe that means you're really into cats and you want to have a look at a lot of cat memes. So start just like looking at all the cats. And then that's going to start having, TikTok or Instagram showing you more cat stuff, because it's very responsive to what we do. And that's probably like a process that you'd want to do, not just once, like you'd want to do it again and again and again, because sometimes we just go slip back into what we used to, and then the algorithm gets stuck in that way again. So we want to kind of catch ourselves. And then actively seeking out other sorts of accounts. So like accounts like Plug My Own, Nutrition by Kiah, where I'm not promoting dieting, I'm promoting like a non-diet healthy eating at every size account, like approach, accounts that celebrate diversity in bodies. So you're not just seeing the same old body all the time on your social media account as well. And, people that, might be more into that non-diet, body positivity, body neutrality space. So it's not just all about being thin and muscular and attractive. There's more diversity in there.
Yeah. There's this this basically sums up exactly what you said, so I'm going to go for it. But there's this acronym that I found, and I can't remember the person who came up with it, but the acronym is TIME, and the T stands for time restricted, the I stands for intentional, the M stands for mindful, and the E stands for enriching. So you think about this acronym TIME when you're getting on social media, and that's basically what you explained in much more detail. But I think it's super powerful. Like, put some restrictions, because we know that we can get endlessly scrolling and just keep going and going and going. But at least if we have some friction, like something pops up, like, hey, you've been on Instagram now for 25 minutes. Okay, at least I have something pop up. And then, like you're saying, be super intentional about it. Like, why are you going on there? Generally, I try to go on social media to find sweet podcast guests. That's how I found you. Great. Look where we're at now. Awesome. And I'm mindful about it. Like, okay, I'm going here to do this, or I'm going here to answer a few comments or see my DMs, and then boom, I'm off, and it's enriching. My feed is awesome. It's about, it's all basically baseball highlights and people talking about personal development. So when I go on there, it is enriching because I'm either learning something or I'm seeing a sweet highlight. And so I think that's a really, really, really powerful tool, because we can't expect kids not to be on social media. That's it. That's just not going to happen. And that's a stupid thing to tell them to do, because like you mentioned earlier, we have a sense of belonging, and all of my friends are on it. So I'm going to be on it too. So how can we just be a little bit better about it? And also, adults don't have this figured out. So we can't even expect kids who are 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, maybe all the way up to like 20 to also just magically have it figured out when they've grown up with these things. We have to teach them these tools over time, so eventually they can be better at it. And we can embody that too, through how we use social media. So I think it's quite powerful, because it's not going anywhere, and it's only getting more pervasive and difficult to understand, and technology is growing and all of that stuff. So but
definitely. It's a weird world we live
in. Sometimes, I just try to do the best I can, and I make the assumption that other people are doing the best they can too, and that's made my life better. So
it's a good assumption to have.
Yeah. But speaking of, what's your thoughts on diet? Do you like that word? Do you not like that word? Or diet culture?
Diet,
We'll go with that.
diet culture. Do I like the word diet? I don't know. I feel like diet itself is very nondescript. Going on a diet? No, I don't like going on a diet. Diet itself, I guess diet could be describing anything. It can be describing what someone just usually eats. Like that's their diet.
Mm.
Neither positive or negative. It's just a neutral. It's a word. Diet culture. And so diet culture is like, the world, essentially the world that constantly tells us that we need to diet, we need to lose weight, or we need to look a certain way, or we need to be continually being on this journey to change what our body looks like. That's that kind of diet culture we all generally live in. And do I like the word? Well, I don't know. It's just a word. Very neutral towards it. However, I think it's a bit of a confusing word as well. I feel like it doesn't describe it. I feel like when I started learning about diet culture, I didn't really understand what diet culture even meant. So I think that can make it very confusing. And I think it's probably something that people need to, it'd be nice if more people knew about it. I didn't really know what diet culture meant until I even started working in this space, so I think it's something that it would be great if that was taught in schools, how it impacts us, because it is, it's everywhere. It's very pervasive. I don't know the word. It's essentially seeped into every part of society generally.
Yeah, I don't love the word, because I think whenever people say they're going to go on a diet, they're trying to think about some sort of quick fix for their life. Like, I need to lose 10 pounds for this thing, instead of maybe potentially taking a more holistic approach of like, okay, what are the healthy habits that I can establish in my life that maybe can help me in the long term, so that even if I do want to have ice cream after dinner with my fiance, it's a non-issue. We go get some ice cream. Great. It's awesome. I love ice cream. There's a great shop next to my house. It's delicious. They have this banana pudding ice cream that's freaking to die for. Anyways, but if you're on a quote unquote diet, then you do that, and then there's the shame and guilt that's built into having this thing that you enjoy, when really life is about doing more of the things that you enjoy. Also, there's boundaries on that too. We can't just eat ice cream all day, every day. Everyone knows that. But there is a time and place for all the things that you enjoy. So I think if you're going on a diet, you're essentially trying to do a quick fix for something that's a lifelong journey. We have relationship with our food for the rest of our life. Food is what our body needs to survive, to do great things, to have energy, to do all of this stuff. It's also part of culture. Like, I'm Jewish, and food is a huge part of get-togethers and family gatherings in our religion. It's like a beautiful part of it. And so I think of that about diet, because I think a lot about habits. And so I think it's more, you can speak to this definitely, but more about establishing those healthy habits rather than trying to just do this thing quickly and then potentially something happens afterwards where the weight comes back or you revert back to old ways because you didn't establish the appropriate system.
Yeah, definitely. I'm a massive fan of not going on diets, like specific regimented diets, which can be disguised in many different ways depending on the flavor of the year. Because essentially they just don't work. And research supports that, and I just don't think as a society we realize that enough. A lot of the studies that look at long-term weight loss generally finds that the majority of people who intentionally go and lose weight gain it back, like a very, very high percentage. And they don't only gain it back, they generally gain more. And that's actually, that kind of dieting cycle is more problematic for health than weight. It's actually worse to be on kind of this continuous yo-yo of dieting. And so I guess the thing about dieting itself, is when people go on a diet and when they eventually, quote unquote, fall off the bandwagon, get off, often they don't blame the diet. They kind of go, oh, the diet was really good. I lost 10 kilos. It was just me. I fell off. I didn't have enough willpower. When in actual fact, it's not your fault. It's not the willpower. It's the fact that the diet wasn't sustainable to begin with. You're never going to be able to maintain that. And so we kind of internalize that as, I need to do better, I need to try harder, instead of going like, oh, hey, maybe I should potentially not diet. Because when we look at, I guess, the research with health habits, like you talked about, that is so much more beneficial to long-term health. So like there's a study that they did, it's one of my favorite studies, where they looked at 11,000 people. I think it was nurses actually they looked at. And they looked at them in different BMI categories. I don't really like BMI categories, but they used it for the study. So they put people in 3 different BMI categories, so quote unquote healthy weight range, overweight weight range, and obese weight range. And they looked at these 11,000 people against these 4 different health habits. So they looked at, were they eating enough fruits and vegetables, like 5 serves of fruits and veggies each day? Were they exercising? And I think for the study, it was about like 15 minutes of exercise 3 times a week. It wasn't like a huge amount. Were they not smoking, and were they not drinking too much alcohol? And what essentially they found was, for people that were doing none of the health habits, so they were drinking too much, they were smoking, they weren't eating enough fruits and veggies, and they weren't exercising, the people who had the highest risk of death were people in the obese weight range, and the lowest risk of death in healthy weight range. However, what they found was, as these people started to add 1, 2, 3, 4 health habits, that the risk of death was exactly the same no matter what their weight range. So kind of indicating that, if someone, no matter if they're in the healthy weight range or the obese weight range, if they're doing those habits, not smoking, not drinking too much, not eating enough fruits and vegetables, and exercising, it doesn't matter what your weight is, your risk of death is essentially the same. And so that just reinforces the importance that health behaviors are so much better than just focusing on your weight, because we have so much more control of our health behaviors than we do of our weight. Our weight is mostly influenced by genetics. There's lots of different things that influence it, but health behaviors, we can control more. You can control how much alcohol you drink, whether you eat enough fruits and veggies, whether you exercise, whether you don't smoke. I say that with asterisks, sometimes there's, things that we consider around that as well. But, for the majority of people, focus on those health behaviors. Don't just focus on the weight.
Is there you think there's like a predetermined weight that people are sort of destined to be at based on their genetics and things like that? Is there a theory for that?
Yeah, there's something called set point theory. So set point theory is essentially where your body generally likes to sit at. So genetics play a massive part in that. Essentially, like your genetics, what your family is like, your family's body types, body weight, and is a massive indicator as to what your body weight will essentially get to. Also, your history of dieting as well. Like, if you are someone who has dieted and kind of gained weight every time you've gone on a diet, gone off a diet, yeah, that can kind of increase your set point theory as well, because essentially your body is in famine every time you go on a diet, so it wants to protect itself from, not going, through the famine again. So set point theory is essentially like your body likes to stay in a relatively particular weight range. When you kind of eat a little bit more than your body needs, your metabolism will increase, kind of keep it at that weight range. When you eat a little bit less than your body needs, the metabolism will decrease, so it kind of gets back to that weight range. I guess, however, the thing is, though, I think as a society, it's probably quite hard for us to find our set point always, because I say this with, I probably have a bit of a skewed view of, people, because I work with a lot of people with disordered eating, and I understand that not everyone has disordered eating, but in my world, feels that way because that's what I do. But, I think, as a society, a lot of people don't know how to eat intuitively, how to listen to their body, how to trust their body, for one reason or another. And I think that can affect people's ability to get to their set point. Because if we're always trying to eat by rules and like this many macros or this much protein I need, or, we're not actually listening to our body. And part of finding that set point theory and like listening to what our body, or figuring out what our body is supposed to sit at, is about listening to what our body actually needs. Is it hungry? Is it full? And that's also how we get a bit of a better relationship with food too.
Yeah, I'd imagine it's very hard to find that weight that your body feels really good at. Like I'm not sure. Like for me, I think I like when I sit around sort of the 220, 230 range, I feel best. I feel like, light. I can move. My body feels good when I wake up. My fiance thinks I don't eat enough, and she's probably right, because sometimes I forget to eat. But she's there to remind me. But like, that's so like when I tell people that sometimes I forget to eat, they're like, "How? You're so big." I'm like, dude, it's like sometimes it's just like not on. Like, I don't know. And then I get really hungry and my stomach starts to hurt. And I'm like, oh, dude, you should probably eat some food. Like, and then I usually eat my biggest meal at night, because then I guess I've basically starved myself all. But anyways, this is not a therapy session for me.
But I think your experience is reflective of a lot of people's experiences as well. Like, it's pretty common to forget to eat sometimes as well. Like, I even get like that sometimes. Like, so it's just hard. Like, and this is the thing, we're not like, I guess humans used to probably be able to like we live in a very busy society. We are doing a lot of things every day. We're not just sitting thinking about our hunger and fullness signals and being mindful and, picking, I don't know, the potatoes from the field, like life is busy. Life is very stressful. There's a lot of things on, and all of these things can influence hormones and influence your sleep habits, influence your, big ability to regulate your hunger and fullness needs. So I think it is difficult. Like you said, I think sometimes it's really difficult to, be able to potentially figure out what your set point is, or allow your body to figure it out what it is. And I also think as well, I think there's a difference as well to what sometimes we feel like we feel best in our body and what our body actually wants us to be as well. Like sometimes we might feel better in our body in a lower body weight. We actually might feel like we can do more. But if maintaining that body weight means that you have to over exercise, really restrict your diet, not be able to do social things, then that's potentially the body weight that the body's not meant to be, even if you feel bested that way as well. And I think that's where it gets complex as well.
Very, very complex. I always wonder about people who, because I've really never really met anyone or known anyone who's had a like a very serious eating disorder. So it's hard for me to fully comprehend that. And so what would you say to someone like me who maybe is experiencing that, and they're in a family, or they're talking to a friend, or something like that?
Like as in, like, what would I say to someone who's trying to understand someone with an eating disorder?
Yeah. Like I'm trying to understand maybe anorexia like, or binge eating, or things that are extremely challenging, and I know they're very painful and pervasive, and they're a serious mental health condition and all of that stuff. But still, I've never been in the trenches of that. I have my own issues, which I've talked about, but that's much different.
Yeah. I think about, I guess, a time when you're really, really hungry, like even like where, like, say, how you talked about skipping meals, and like you felt really like fatigued, potentially lightheaded, shaky, but more than that, kind of, I guess, thinking about food, you're like, oh my God, I need to eat, I'm really hungry. Essentially, someone with an eating disorder, and like, look, different eating disorders are different, but one thing that's generally common across eating disorders is preoccupation of food. So I guess take that feeling of like, thinking about, oh my God, what am I going to eat when I get home? I'm really, really hungry, even like the cravings. Like that's kind of what someone with an eating disorder experiences 24/7. Is just thinking about food all the time. So being in that spot makes it very difficult to have room for much else as well. Because if you're always thinking about food, you might spend a lot of time researching about food. You might spend a lot of time making food, preparing the food, freaking out about the food and what you're about to eat, you often might not have time to go out and see friends. You might not have time to go watch baseball and do do all your hobbies and things like that, because a lot of your time is spent thinking about food. And so it can be quite, it can be quite really, really, really difficult, essentially on a day-to-day basis, because you just don't have the brain capacity to do much else, And so that's kind of what I would kind of explain it as close if someone hasn't experienced an eating disorder. But it's also extremely exhausting as well, I always say kind of having an eating disorder is almost more than a full-time job, because your brain is constantly thinking about these things all the time. But not only that, like you still, have to eat generally, and that looks different to different people with eating disorders. But they're generally still eating in some capacity, that just, creates another burden. And then, it affects relationships because, you might, say, there's someone with a partner with an eating disorder. It can be really frustrating if your partner has no idea what you're experiencing and you're experiencing this internal thing all the time and they just don't get it and they might make comments, and then you have other people making comments at you all the time like, oh, is that you've eaten too much, or you've eaten too little, or why don't you eat more, or you look like that, you've changed. And it's the other people, the comments all the time. And then you have the world that's kind of, you walk out and then there's a bus stop that's like, go on this diet and lose 25 kilos. Or there's like, Kim Kardashian being like, oh, I've just started on Ozempic, and like, so there's just, and then it kind of creates, uncertainty within you, like, oh my gosh, should I do that as well? And so there's just a lot of these thoughts all the time. And that's how I would explain having an eating disorder in a way.
Your life is driven by rules, constant rules.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I heard you say that. That's the only reason I knew that.
Yeah. It is essentially like that. It's like, and how we talked about dieting before as well. It's kind of like, we might pick up these different food rules being like, say 10 almonds are a portion, for example. Let's just say that you might have heard that food rule. And then, if you eat 10 almonds, maybe you feel okay, but if you eat 11 almonds, you maybe find you're experiencing like crippling guilt and anxiety and shame for eating just one more almond, from this food rule that, you may have picked up from like literally just some random walking down the street, and then you get that food rule, and then you might get another food rule that says, you can't eat white bread, and then you have another food rule because maybe someone else says you can't eat gluten, like, and the food rules come up and more and more and more, and it's very difficult to live by so many rules. It's very overwhelming because you keep on worrying about what to eat, and it's just mentally exhausting.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like that's where it becomes less about the food specifically and more a psychological battle that you're going through every single day, which is why obviously it's a very serious mental health condition.
Yeah, and it's got the eating disorders have the highest mortality rate of any mental health illness because it can be so dangerous on the body, which is why when we work so closely with medical professionals and doctors to make sure people are getting medically checked, their heart's okay, their blood pressure's okay, because things can change very, very quickly. The body needs food to survive, and if we are not getting enough food, then the body can have pretty bad consequences as a result of that. Yeah, it's eating disorders are pretty deadly. But even so, like even without being diagnosed with an eating disorder per se, like disordered eating, which this all just exists on a continuum, that can be just as difficult as well. And I guess the thing is, a lot of disordered eating behaviors are kind of normalized in our society. I think the thing as well that I just wanted to mention is like often eating disorders, they act as a function. So like they help us cope and give us a sense of control in times where things might be out of our control. There are so many reasons why eating disorders develop, but a common thing is they often, give us a sense of control in response to whatever it is. Maybe it's some sort of trauma where you might not have had any control of what was happening to you, what was going on, and the eating disorder kind of gives us a sense of control.
Yeah, that makes sense. The only thing that in my life that allows me to comprehend what you're saying is a personal story of mine. I lost my big sister Rachel back in 2018 to suicide, and a lot of rhetoric around suicide is that it's selfish, and similar to an eating disorder is that the people who say that have never experienced that level of pain and darkness and the depths of fucking hell they're in their own mind. They've never experienced that. Thank God. I don't want anyone to experience that ever. I hope no one has to do that ever again in their life. But you only say suicide is selfish because you've never been in that position and you don't know how much pain that person is in, that the only way out of this pain is to take their own life. And that's how my brain sort of views how I comprehend what you're trying to say. Like, I don't see the internal battle that you're going through every day, just looking at what I see as normal foods, you see as this fucking absolutely massive hill that you have to climb up every single fucking time you're thinking about food, which is all the time. And for someone to say like, just like get over it, like eat some regular foods, they've never been in that spot. And so that for me is how I'm comprehending what you're saying.
I'm so sorry to hear that you went through that. That sounds very, very difficult, but very accurate in what you're kind of saying as well. Accurate in, I guess, a couple of different ways. Depression and anxiety are very commonly associated with eating disorders. We often kind of see them together as well. Like in kind of like can go both ways. Eating disorders can create depression. Depression can create eating disorders as well. They can help us cope with depression again. But that overwork, and again, it's different from person to person. But say if we take anorexia for example, that that feeling that you described of not being able to see a way out, that's kind of all you feel. That's kind of similar to eating disorders, just this constant feeling of food and not being able to see a way out. And I guess we kind of know as well that food plays a big part in this in terms of the actual act of being malnourished, not eating enough, not getting enough nutrition creates a lot of these thoughts, so refeeding, so eating enough, getting enough nutrition for our body doesn't fix everything. There's still a lot of work that has to be done after that point, again, depending on the eating disorder, but it does fix a bit of it too. Our brain can make better decisions and engage in treatment, whether the dietitian or a psychologist or whoever it is, when we are not starved. So kind of making sure we are eating enough, going along that pathway is a massive part of this, so that our brain can potentially recover and heal.
Yeah. I mean, how do we move forward, maybe as an individual or as a society, to better our relation with food, make peace with our body, to heal our relationship with food, to see our body as this beautiful vessel that we have, and treat it maybe as such?
I think the first step with all of this stuff is just taking non-judgmental observation of what we are experiencing currently with our relationship with food and our body. So noticing, how do we feel about our body? How do we feel towards food? Do certain times we see our body make us feel uncomfortable? Why would that be? And kind of just really observing what our own experience is, because we can't change or challenge anything until we really know what is going on for ourselves. So that would always be kind of the first step. That's something that Obviously this isn't replacing one-on-one advice, but like that's something you might want to do by yourself, or something that you might want to engage with a dietitian or a psychologist for help with as well. And then starting to kind of understand diet culture, I think, is really useful. Understanding, okay, I'm noticing that I, feel pressured to have this certain body type. Why might that be? Starting to understand, how maybe body ideals have changed throughout the ages. You might want to read books. There's really really good one with like anti-diet. And starting to kind of unpack, okay, why do I have these ideals? Because you weren't born with these ideals. We were kind of conditioned to have them, and starting to understand things like fat phobia, or it's also called anti-fat bias, which is, how do we feel towards people in different body types? Do we feel, discomfort looking at some body types? Do we feel like we idolize other body types? Because, also questioning, where that might have come from, and starting to unpack that. Because if we hear a lot of these, comments about bodies around us, we start to internalize them. And to kind of work on our own relationship with food and body, we have to almost understand where our own biases came in, and how did our own ideals develop. Starting to kind of look towards like body neutrality, which is like not like this kind of middle ground in between like hating your body and loving your body, where we view our body more of a vessel and accepting it for all the things that it lets us do every day, like sitting down and doing a podcast. And we might not love our body. It might not be our idealistic version in our head, but we can start to respect it. And then starting to like explore more of things from like getting away from the diets, really, understanding diet culture, maybe looking into like the non-diet space and healthy eating at every size, and learning really is a big thing. And obviously working with a professional, if you can, highly recommend it for that advice. That's kind of where I would start.
Yeah, it sounds a lot like how I train some of my athletes to think about their mindset. And I use this 3-step approach called awareness, acceptance, action. And basically, I think that's what you're saying. Like, become aware of some of the things that might bother you, or foods, or how you feel, or your fullness, or when you get hungry. And if you're eating enough, super important, please eat enough. I can't tell you how many people tell me they're trying to lose weight and they're not eating. I'm like, that's the opposite. Eat more food, eat. Anyways, so you become aware, like you're saying, and then you accept. I think acceptance is huge. Acceptance also, at least in my mind, doesn't mean like this is who you have to be forever. Acceptance is just like, this is my current starting point. This is where I am right now. This is reality. I am this person. This person is okay exactly how I am in this moment. Doesn't mean I can, of course I can get better. Everyone can get better. Better can be a relative term to what you're trying to achieve. And then, of course, like you're talking about, the last step is action. Do something, hire someone, read some books, listen to podcasts, think more deeply about, how you want to go about your life, or how you want to feel, or things like that. And so I think just to break it down like that is powerful for people who are trying to engage in this sort of body neutrality, as you say.
Definitely.
But yeah, definitely eat food. Can't express that enough. Don't be like me and don't eat for 12 hours straight. Eat some food.
Yeah,
but
definitely recommend that. Well, recommend the eating food, not eating for 12 hours straight.
Yeah. My last question to ask you is related to your daughters. What would you want them to learn, take away, or maybe know about, or have about their relationship with food when they grow up, or get older, or reach a stage where they're thinking about what they're eating and things like that?
Really good question. So in our household, we really try and do all the things that I preach. So don't comment on bodies, listen intuitively to our body, and not have any foods off limits. And so I essentially would love them to have a good relationship with food and their body, but also I guess, have armor around the diet culture that we receive in our society, because they're girls. So, they've already had diet culture stuff at them. Like my 2-year-old the other day in the car said, was eating a banana. I was like, I can't eat the whole banana because otherwise I'll get fat. I was like, she's 2. Yeah, very great. Didn't pick that up from me. So I was very angry about that, which is horrific. But, I want them to have that kind of armor to go, okay, let's have a bit of critical thinking as to, whether this information that we've been given to ourselves is true, when it's when there's diet talk around, and feel confident in their bodies. But also kind of trust their bodies as well. That's, I guess, the most important thing. Like, trust their bodies, know how much, they need. Like, in our house, we kind of always sit down for dinner together. We eat, whatever, like we eat our meal cooked as a family, whatever's on the, menu for the night. And I really try not to pressure, the kids into what's it, like, well, I don't pressure the kids into how much they should eat. Which initially actually freaked me out quite a bit when one of them was younger, because one of them doesn't eat very much at all, which still kind of slightly freaks me out, but that's just a dietitian thing. But, I just kind of trust that their bodies know how much that they need. And, not pressuring them to say, like, eat your broccoli or eat your broccolini or whatever it is. Like, had the kind of perfect example the other night where I can't remember what we were eating. I think we were eating like spaghetti, like some sort of pesto spaghetti with broccoli. And like I dished them all up, and one of them, like the older one, the 2-year-old, was like, "Oh, I don't want any broccoli. I don't like broccoli." I was like, "Okay, that's fine. Just put it in a bowl next to your plate. That's fine. Just have it there." And didn't really make any fuss about it, and just said, "Yeah, whatever." And then like halfway through the meal, she started eating the broccoli anyway. And I was like, "Huh, there you go. Interesting." She'd like, I guess, that no pressure. She can eat whatever is on her plate. I know she can trust her body, hunger and fullness. And then she eats whatever. Like, she eats what she's kind of drawn to. Like, same with like chocolate. Like, I love chocolate, but white chocolate only. We don't have it all the time, but like we do have it like our movie nights, and I might share a bar of chocolate with her. And I don't really tell her how much or how little she should have. Like, she just, if she keeps asking, I'll just keep giving it to her. She eventually stops when she's ready. And that's like, sometimes 1 piece, sometimes like 3 rows. I have a lot of trust that her body knows how much she needs. And I think that, I want her to develop that as she gets older, that she can just trust her body and her own hunger and fullness levels, and not feel that she's good for eating something and bad for eating something else.
Yeah, that's really powerful. That armor piece, I think, is really quite amazing, because like, no matter what you do or what you tell them, they're still going to go out into the world and receive tons of other stuff. Like, your 2-year-old is already receiving that information from someone somewhere. So that armor and being able to like receive that information from wherever they see it and be like, no, that doesn't fit for me. That doesn't work for me. This is what I've learned, and this is what has worked for me, is really powerful, that armor piece. And speaking of white chocolate, my fiance is from England, and every time we go there or her mom visits, they bring white chocolate or we bring white chocolate back, because it's way better in England than it is in the States. So we love us some white chocolate bars.
I used to live in England, so maybe that's why I like it.
It's so good. I don't know why. It's just like, it's a little bit richer. It's like nice and like sort of milky in your mouth. Oh, it's delicious. Fantastic.
Yeah, definitely.
But thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing. Thanks for being thanks for being here. Thanks for just sharing your wisdom with the world and doing what you do for people. And I appreciate it very much.
No worries. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Where should people go if they want more of you?
Yeah, sure. So you can find me on Instagram at Nutrition by Kiah, so Kiah, or Imbodi Health, Imbodi Health, which we've also got a podcast where we talk all about improving your relationship with food and your body. which is the Imbodi Health podcast, or you can have a look at our website, which is www.imbodihealth.com, where we've got heaps of freebies as well to start your own journey on improving your relationship with your body, like our Breaking Cravings ebook and our Breaking Up with Diets ebook as well.
Fantastic. Yeah, everyone check that out. Linked in the show notes below. And thank you. See you guys next time. If you enjoyed that episode, please click here for another full-length episode of the podcast. And please don't forget to subscribe. But above all else, most importantly, please take good care of yourselves and others. And I'll see you next time. Lots of love. Cheers.